Alright, so this is Ordinary Madness, episode 61. I'm Steve Barker, and with me today is writer, comedian, video maker, cartoonist, Brett Hamil.
Hello.
And it's Hamil, right? Not
yes.
Hamil. Hamil. And so the first thing I just want to talk about, because it's what really make me realize like how brilliant you are, is one of your videos. So if you're listening to this and you haven't watched The Saddest Man in the World, there's a link in the comments. It's about 90 seconds. So hit pause, watch that, and then...
It's super short.
Yeah.
I understand the complete annihilation of the attention span, so I try to keep them as short as humanly possible.
Yeah. Well, and that one is so short, and I think it's brilliant. It's probably one of the videos I've shared. Like, it's one of those, like, once I saw it, I was like, everybody I know has to see this. And I didn't know what the, like, punchline or the end was going to be, and it's kind of slow moving. You're kind of wondering what happens, and then there's a great payoff at the end. So I'm kind of curious. You're somebody who puts lots of content out into the world, and so I'm wondering if somehow that video was inspired because of something that might have happened to you, or...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I write a regular column for City Arts, and I have developed trolls. I developed a bad case of the trolls. Not that bad. It's probably like... The sad thing is, Seattle is such a small comedy scene that, like, you know who this is, or... You know, but someone just leaving really vicious comments on articles, including an article I just did about trolls, about
really?
Anonymous trolls. I wrote an article about, I anonymously interviewed a sort of white hat troll. He's like a good guy, he's a feminist dude, but he gets into comment sections and dukes it out with these human scum.
So like an anti-troll?
He's kind of like an anti-troll.
Oh, okay.
He's still a troll. He's still anonymously posting stuff, but he's like a good feminist, progressive dude who tries to represent that viewpoint and call people on shit, but which I think is a complete waste of time. Even that article had a troll on it. So, you know, trolls they have no sense of irony. They say such terrible things. So someone left a troll comment, and it really bummed me out for like a good better part of a few days. And then I decided that I wanted to make some sort of response in video form. So what that video is basically just my expedition into the black soul of a troll.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just trying to reverse it, you know.
Right. I really enjoyed it. So are you the type of person where you get affected by the troll comments? Can you brush them off, or you gotta...
It's amazing how thick your skin can get so quickly. Like after the first couple troll comments, and I've gotten a lot of troll comments on YouTube for all my videos and stuff, but after it's happened a few times, like really vicious personal attacks, you just have to say like, all right, whatever, like consider the source. People,
yeah.
So now I don't even look at the comments.
Right.
If I get like a really mean tweet, if someone tweets at me something really mean on Twitter, I will retweet it just because I think it's funny to broadcast what they have to say. But they're the worst. They are the worst people in the world.
Well, and it's interesting because from at least the work that I've seen of yours, I don't see you as very confrontational, or at least mean. I've never seen anything you've done mean. So it surprises me that you get those comments, especially, we have a few friends in common, and so before doing this, I just mentioned to a few people, and everybody, he's such a nice guy, he's the nicest guy. So
that's good to hear.
Yeah, nobody was like,
I only hear from the trolls, so...
Well, everybody I talk to seems to think you're a really nice guy, and, you know...
Got him fooled.
Right.
It's great.
So... Like, when they're attacking you, is it just they're saying, "Oh, you're not funny," or like?
Yeah. There's the personal troll who like doesn't like you as a person, but can't stop looking at the content you're putting out.
Right.
That is kind of flattering. Like, the first few I got of those, I was like, oh, wow, I have haters now. Like, I actually might have a go at a career if people can hate me this much. So there's those kind. And then there's other ones, like, I did this other video called Mansplaining Women's History, which is kind of like, it was made for Women's History Month, and it's basically dudes. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of mansplaining, but just, it's a really... It's the way that men will insultingly explain something to a woman, assuming that she naturally wouldn't know of what you're speaking. So that one, it's a feminist piece, but that has attracted this whole, like, troll clique of, like, sort of anti-feminist men's rights activists. And, like, I'll get little updates of, like, comments that have showed up on my YouTube page. So they've had this continuing discussion about, like, why feminism is wrong, and underneath this video that is a total feminist video. So those are just your more... I think there's a certain type of troll on YouTube that just looks for types of content that they know they're going to disagree with to leave nasty comments. I also did a video with a comic named Anthony Robinson called How to Shake a Black Guy's Hand, and he's a person of color, so... we talk about how annoying it is for him to, when people try to give you the, like, you know, jive handshake or whatever, all he wants is a normal handshake. So that one also has attracted a bunch of, like, racists, and, you know, it used to bother me, but I think you just have to wear it as a badge of honor, you know. That's the best you can do with it. I don't delete them. Like, leave them up. Let people see the entire range of the discourse, you know.
Yeah, well, and then just because you were talking about feminism, it seems this weekend a whole shitstorm kind of started, and I think you were not a title you gave yourself. Somebody else said that you're a shit stirrer upper or something along those lines, and we don't have to get into the whole thing that happened because it's all online. And there was even a disclaimer that's like, if you're not involved in the Seattle comedy scene, which I'm not, you don't need to go ahead and read this whole thing, which of course I did.
Of course. You know, that's such an inducement to read it. Ooh.
Well, and the thing is, it just kept popping up on my Facebook, like speculation, old guest, he put it up first. And I remember Lindy West from when she wrote for The Stranger.
Yeah.
And she seems to be somebody who just, I don't know how she can deal with it, just trolls. Like, she would post things on Slog that were like a movie review, and then it'd be like, you fat bitch, and I was just like, absolutely, man, she must have some thick skin to...
She does, and she's a total role model for me in all this, because I mean, I don't get, no one really cares. I mean, you know, I have my own little tiny slice of the internet, but she gets, like, you know, insane threats and tweets daily, like by the dozens. So you know, I kind of try to follow her example, or other people I know who have, you know, incurred the wrath of the angry dude, which is just like, all right, whatever, man, you know, on to the next thing, basically.
Well, and it seemed like a lot of that was sparked because of misogyny in comedy, and it seems like that's something you don't support.
No, I do not support that.
Yeah.
Well, then, hold on, let me think about this.
Right. Well, and then the whole thing about rape jokes, and that's been it seems like the past couple of years, that's been like a hot topic of, you know, comedians. I listen to a lot of other comedy podcasts, and that comes up a lot. And it seems like there's this group of guys that just feel like they're going to lose something if rape jokes go away. And I don't know if I completely understand that.
They've chosen to make their final stand on Rape Joke Hill, you know. Like, they think that is... they think if you take away the rape jokes, then the next thing you're not going to be able to joke about, you know, retards or Polacks or whatever other stupid thing, you know, that they feel is being taken from them, which is the whole history of white male privilege and where it is at right now. I mean, that's why Lindy incurs so much anger, because she is, like, right on the sort of cusp, you know, the sort of crest of the wave of, you know, other voices being heard. I mean, the bigger sort of master narrative is that, you know, social media like Twitter and Facebook has forced us to confront the perspective of the other, right? So a lot of people have never even considered what feminists think, and now that they know what they think, they're pissed and they send violent threats to them and they make fake Twitter accounts to harass them with. Right. Whereas, 20 years ago, you could just not read a book on feminism and not get riled up. Now it's unavoidable, and a certain segment of the population who is mostly white, male, and in their 20s, and doesn't have a girlfriend and has a shitty job. So they think, well, how am I privileged? They don't understand the sort of intrinsic nature of, like, how or why they would be privileged.
Right.
They're super angry because they feel like things are being taken from them. And I think there's always been people angry like that, but comedy evolves. I mean, comedy doesn't stay funny. It has to keep evolving to be something. And you can't, if you expect to go up in a club and make fun of, quote unquote retards or whatever, like, you're going to bum people out and they're not going to think you're funny. And that's what, it used to be easier for them to just make fun of, oh, look at all the Mexicans in the kitchen, or, they used to be able to make those sort of cheap shots that aren't really inherently funny at all, to get like a quick shock laugh, and now they can't do that anymore. And a lot of times they operate on, it's sort of evolutionarily hardwired into our brains to laugh at something that is shocking.
Right.
It's how the caveman reacted to like a rock falling and barely missing him, So they use that sort of hardwired reaction to get a response. It's not a genuine laugh. It's just a laugh of like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. Or, oh my God, that makes me uncomfortable. I can't believe it. Those guys are losing ground, like, at least in the way in my world they are.
Yeah.
So,
and is it the type of thing that just comes down to what's funny? Or, because, like, if you look back in the 80s, like, comics were always saying faggot, and, like, even, like, Eddie Murphy Raw, which I still think is really funny, but there's certain parts of it, you look at it now, and you're almost cringing, like, oh my God.
It's brutal.
That would not be funny today. And is it something that evolves, or just, like, do you think people are going to be wanting to tell rape jokes 20 years from now? Or if they do, will they get a laugh?
Yes, of course. They will just have to consider, I mean, it's not a joke about, it has never been an issue of censorship. I mean, this is what makes me more angry than the fact that these guys do shitty things to people, is they don't have any reading comprehension. Lindy West's whole point was, you have to examine the content of what you're doing to not alienate people, because you're supposed to be entertaining them. Right. Like, around that time, that whole, when she appeared on this show and debated with Jim Norton about it, and she posted this essay on Jezebel, and I was in Portland doing some shows with, like, a pretty veteran road dog guy. Not someone you would think would be, like, super sensitive, and have really progressive sensibilities. Just sort of a gut bucket roadhouse comic. And we were talking about this, and he's like, yeah, why would you even tell a rape joke? I'm here to entertain, not to bum people out.
Right.
I mean, it's such a strictly academic discussion that only plays out in these shitty alt open mics, like, in the real working world, you're there to entertain. You're not there to push hot buttons just for the sake of pushing them, Right. If a great, Louis C.K. has had great rape jokes, in which the victim of the joke was the rapist, not the victim. There's ways to do it right. But if you're going to broach a topic like that or racism or whatever, the joke has to be funny enough to pay off for the, bringing up a painful subject. Like, it has to be funnier. You can't invoke these terrible historical things and then just bum everyone out. It has to be something, you have to have an original take on it. And a lot of these shitbirds, they don't have an original take. And all they've been able to get laughs off of is just pushing hot buttons and, portraying stereotypes. And now they can't do that anymore. Or they can do it, but now they're going to get called out on it. It's not even like anyone's censoring them. they just now have to understand that they have to be accountable for the things they say, which is in every other discipline or field is just a complete no-brainer. Yeah, right. You're accountable for what you say. You can't just say, "Oh, it's comedy, get over it, it's a comedy show." Like, that's not enough. That comedy is not some magical fairy dust you can sprinkle over things to say terrible, hurtful things, you know?
Right. So, and I think this was what Lindy's point in the Kamau Bell, because I watched that and I felt that debate just didn't get enough of it. It was like 5 minutes. There wasn't. I didn't think there was anything there to get on either side, but it seemed more that it was just like nothing's off limits if you approach it in the right way and it's funny. Like, is that how you feel? Like, can there be a funny rape joke? Or
absolutely, nothing is off limits. But you do still have an obligation to the audience to entertain and make them laugh. You know, right. They didn't pay to like listen to a lecture. They paid to like have a good time. You know, a lot of them like hired babysitters and shit to come out. Yeah. So yeah, nothing's off limits. Absolutely not. You know, but it has to be done in a way. Like, I have some jokes that sort of hinge on racism, for example. Or homophobia, where the target is the homophobe, not the gay person. Right. You know, there's a huge distinction there. And even some of those jokes, I'm like, you know what? I don't feel like the payoff is enough to invoke, you know, the millennia-old specter of racism, you know. It's just not worth it. It's a funny joke, yeah, but the longer I'm in comedy, the cleaner I am and the more, like, trying to entertain everyone I am.
Yeah.
This whole rape joke phenomenon and this whole angry First Amendment stuff is just, it's such an academic discussion, and the people that are angriest about it are only performing in free shows in bars. You know, they're not even getting paid to do it. So it's like, look, you know, if you ever get to where you have an actual audience, you've got to bring them something more than this.
Right, yeah, and I should say, and I'm not saying this to be mean just because it's honest. One of those guys that has had this whole thing with Lindy, I've actually seen him perform before, like 3 years ago. Maybe he's gotten better, but I did not enjoy his set at all and didn't think it was very funny. But so you're heavily involved in Seattle, and I know you curate events. I think you have an event tomorrow night.
Yes.
So when you're picking these comments for these events, like, what are you looking for, or like a lot of these your friends, or like what's the curating process for you? Like?
I mean, I'm coming up on my 8th year doing comedy, and I think the longer you do it, the less I just care about originality and someone being a good and cool and interesting person that translates on stage. Back to your other point of these troll guys, like, yeah, a lot of these guys, they're not fun to be around. If you can be unfunny and be a fun guy to be around and just pay attention, and you can become a funny comic, you know, like, I think maybe 80%, 70 or 80% of a comedy career is just being someone that other people can tolerate being around, so they'll bring you on the road.
Right.
You know? So, yeah, I'm just looking for people. I mean, obviously I'm looking for a kind of more progressive sensibility that is, you know, consistent with my own views, but it's not even that. It's just, obviously you have to be funny, but there will be a few spots on each showcase for younger comics that aren't moving up yet, but they have promise. And then ultimately it's just, I want to book people that make me laugh, that I like to hang out in the green room with, and that are funny on and off stage. You know, that's what I'm going for. Right.
So tomorrow night, which, depending on when you're listening to this, but tomorrow's Wednesday, which is
the 18th.
The 18th, and it's at the Comedy Underground.
Comedy Underground. It's called. My show is called Bunt Cake. BUNDT Cake. There's also one on July 2nd at the Comedy Underground as well.
Right on. Well, one of the interesting things I saw about the one tomorrow night is a lot of the people on it I didn't recognize, but there was one name I think everybody would recognize, which is Sinbad, who very strangely over the weekend Comedy Central was playing. I think it was an hour he did in like 2013, so maybe only a year ago, which I didn't even know he was still around, and it was fucking hilarious. Like, and he's a clean guy, right? I don't think he ever swears.
Yeah, he's pretty clean. Well, I'll give you an Ordinary Madness exclusive. Sinbad is actually not going to be at the show. I would like to apologize for any misunderstanding. Basically what happened was I was typing the names into Photoshop and there was some space at the bottom. So I just said fuck it and put Sinbad in as the last name. And then posted it on Facebook, and immediately people were like, "Whoa, Sinbad!"
Well, because I was wondering, I was like, "Why does he get bottom billing?"
That's
I
what
figured, you know. Like...
I thought that would telegraph enough that, like, if you had Sinbad on your show, he'd probably get top billing.
Yeah.
I'll probably have to make a formal announcement tomorrow that Sinbad is not, due to contractual obligations, he will not be, doing a 5-minute set on my showcase show. Although, Sinbad, if you're listening, talk to me.
Right on. So you make a lot of videos, and the one thing I noticed that I couldn't seem to find online, and maybe it's because I'm not a good enough Google searcher, but I couldn't seem to find any videos of you doing actual stand-up online. And I was wondering if, because I know a lot of comics hate, like, working out a set or whatever in somebody's cell phone, recording with their cell phone, and I was curious... one, is there videos if people want to go check them out, where to do that, and if there's a reason that there aren't any?
That's a good question, actually. You can. I do have some clips up on rooftopcomedy.com. You can just go and enter my name, Brett Hamil, and there's a few clips that they have recorded that are professionally done. They're like a big sort of comedy aggregator site. I don't have any on my YouTube page just because, first of all, because I've never gotten booked off a video online. I've had bookers look at videos and say, okay, he can do the job, but I don't think it really helps or hurts that way. And also, I do feel like stand-up comedy videos really just remove all of the magic from it. Yeah. Of being in a room with someone who's talking. It just becomes this sort of static thing where you're just kind of listening for the setup and the punchline. And I'm not opposed to it, but I just decided to populate my YouTube channel with all like comedy sketch videos. There's probably a few videos on there that are like set to unlisted or something that I use to get bookings and stuff. Yeah. But it doesn't. There's no real upside. I mean, I'm getting booked for shows, so it's not like someone's going to see one joke of mine and it's going to go viral and make my career. It doesn't really have much benefit. Right. So I'd rather just use things specifically created for YouTube, on my channel. Yeah. And so you said you've been doing this for 8 years. Was that all Seattle that you've been? Yeah, 8 years in November, and I started here. Yeah. Yeah. How has that 8 years been? Stand-up comedy is one of those art forms that I admire so much, but certainly wouldn't do it myself. Don't have like the balls. And the one thing, as being an observer of it, I know that the first year or 2 years is pretty brutal, right? Like, it's the first the first few years are just. I mean, if you're like me, you're just scared every time you get on stage. You're shaky and scared, and that goes away after a few years. Yeah. Maybe at year 3 or 4, I stop being like nervous when I get on stage. But it's terrible, and God bless any friends who came to watch me in my first 2 or 3 years of comedy, just to help and support. It's terrible. They say, like, I heard someone say recently that it takes about 7 or 8 years to find your voice in comedy, and then it takes 10 years to find your audience, and then it takes 15 years to make it. Wow. It's a long process. Or like I think Mark Maron's famous quote is like, it takes 20 years to become an overnight sensation. Right. Like, it just takes you got to get that 1,000 hours, you know.
Yeah.
And until you get it, you know, you're just. I mean, you can be a good comic who's newer, but like to have that like extra quality that people would like pay to go see, this craft, you know, this like sort of hardwired expertise, that takes a long time.
Yeah.
You know?
I heard Greg Fitzsimmons once say it takes you a year to learn how to walk on the stage and take the mic out of the mic stand. Absolutely. And then start doing your set.
Yeah.
So, that's cool though. Like, what drives you in that first year when, you know, maybe you go up and do 5 minutes and don't get a laugh? Like, I'm pretty sure I would run home, curl in a ball, cry, and never do it again. Like, there has to be something in a comic's brain that's like, okay, let's get up and do that.
Yeah.
Again.
I mean, in the negative, if you wanted to put it in the negative way, it's like a pathology. You know, it's this pathological quality of wanting approval.
Right.
You know, I mean, I joke that, like, you know, comics joke that, like, strippers have daddy issues, but comics have the worst daddy issues of all. I mean, they're also on stage under bright lights in front of a bunch of strangers who are judging them.
Right.
So I just find it ridiculous that comics would ever, you know, make fun of strippers for the same thing. I mean, that's the negative way to put it, is like, yeah, you need approval or whatever. The positive way I would put it is that I look at jokes like you're creating a magic trick, or you're crafting some kind of equation that will elicit a response consistently. You know, so just the challenge of writing and making something like that and then figuring out how to perform it in a way that gets laughs is a real intellectual challenge, you know. Like, you can have a super funny idea and not be able to translate it to making audiences laugh. Right. You can also have a really stupid idea that people will laugh at every time. So it's just so unclear what's going to work, and as you do it longer, you start to figure that out, and your efforts take less time. You know, whereas it might have taken you 6 months to develop a 5-minute chunk when you were 4 years in. When you're 10 years in, it takes like a month or 3 open mics, and you've got it. Boom. So, yeah, it's a highly technical craft.
Yeah, and so making you know, funny videos and doing, you know, humor type writing, did that come after the stand-up, or have you just always been involved in creating humorous things?
I always, like, since I was like 8, you know, I've always been a cartoonist. That was my first real career aspiration. I idolized like Bill Watterson of Calvin and Hobbes, and, you know, Burke Breathitt of Bloom County, and, you know, that was what I totally wanted to do. But I didn't really have I'm a left-hander, and I have poor draftsmanship, and I could never be a great draftsman like Bill Watterson or someone like that. So, but I've always liked just making things like zines, cartoons, you know, and then later podcasts and videos and stuff. So the humor writing and cartooning definitely predates comedy by, you know, decades. Yeah. But it's the same basic pursuit, you know, trying to make people laugh.
Yeah, and people can see your cartoons in City Arts. That's if people want to see your writing as well as your cartooning, that's probably the best place for them to check it out, right?
There's my website, bretthamil.com, BRETTHAMIL.com. You can also just look me up on City Arts, and they've got all, you know, I usually do a monthly cartoon, a monthly humor column, and then here and there I'll do a feature article or a news piece for them. Yeah. So that's kind of where, a lot of my work resides now, is there in my YouTube channel.
Yeah. And so, the videos, I think the first time, and well, the funny thing is I'd been reading you in City Arts and didn't put everything together, and I think the first time I really saw who you were was your Ska Vortex video, which I think maybe the Slog posted or something. Mm-hmm. And it was just a very strange, interesting, funny video. And I'm curious, I think we're probably about the same age, and this is embarrassing to admit, but, you know, there was a good 2 years in high school when I spent, you know, my Friday nights in teen centers skanking along to, you know, some ska music. Was that something you were ever interested in, or have you always just been
Yeah,
ska.
that video really hit home to people of a certain age who lived through the third wave of ska, the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, that era. And yeah, I saw like the Boss Tones at Lollapalooza back in the day, and I briefly enjoyed ska along with the other like terrible trends like swing dance. Remember that?
Yeah, that was
in the 90s. Like, yeah, but at the same time, I just hate ska. Like, just it's mercilessly enforced, joviality. Like, just everything's it's just a nightmare,
Right.
Although I know, it's there are a lot of things I hate more than ska. But when I was making that video, I just thought like, what magical thing could you find that no one would even care about or want to see?
Right.
That's the basic gist there.
Nice. Yeah, it's a funny video. So ska music or house music? What's a worse genre of music?
Ska, definitely. Yeah. The like checkerboard ties and the white belts and
you're describing a 17-year-old Steve Parker.
Oh yeah, just sort of husky dudes with fancifully shaven mutton chops, wearing like suits, and just the worst, And like I had to like research ska to I had to find like some of the worst offenders like to use as music for that video.
Yeah,
and it was just painful. Like what was that one song, Knock on Wood?
Boss Tones,
the Boss Tones song Knock on Wood. I actually like broke down the lyrics, and it's the message of the song is the stupidest thing ever, which he's basically saying nothing bad has ever happened to me, but I know some people who have had bad things happen to them, so that's why I knock on wood. It's just the
Right.
most idiotic, fratty, moronic. Yeah, I don't know why I hate ska so much.
Well, the Boss Tones, the thing about them is they were one of the only bands I know that has a guy in the band who's doesn't play any instruments. He's just the guy on stage that just dances for them. And I was wondering, like, does that guy go to band practice, or like they just like before the show, like you pound this beer and now hop on stage with us.
Go act like you're having fun slogging through these terrible songs.
Right.
If it gives people joy, don't listen to me. If it brings you joy, keep listening to it. I don't want to be like one of those troll assholes. So
Right,
that's why I made the video. So I don't have to.
You're not going to ska websites and being like, "You guys all suck."
Maybe that's next. I don't know.
So that was like kind of a funny video, and then another video I watched, which is a funny video and then has a strange little question at the end. And it's your Snapchat video about this guy who it went on for a while. You thought you were Snapchatting with a buddy, and then found out it had been completely random person.
Yeah.
But you guys had been sharing this, and I'm curious: are you still in contact with George?
With Jeff, yeah.
Or Jeff, sorry.
I haven't my Snapchat. I'm really backed up on my Snapchats. I was just I had just learned about it, so I was like really active. And I didn't have a lot going on in the daytime, so I would just, take a video of my dog pooping and send it to all my friends just to mess with them.
Right.
And that guy, I'm sure if I open up Snapchat right now, I'd have 100 messages from him. I still have his phone number. It's still in my phone book.
And he knows that...
He doesn't know. He doesn't know.
So does he think that you're one of his friends, or does he just think you're some random guy? Or do you not even know that?
That's what blows my mind. I never sent him... there was never any hey, who are you? We just were sending Snapchats back and forth. A picture of an apple. He'd send me a picture of his lunch. Those are all... Then when I started filming that video, I started... you can only watch them for 10 seconds. So I would get my camera out and film a batch of his Snapchats to have them on camera.
Right.
And then they would be lost forever. I don't know what he was thinking. I have no idea. I was like, I tried. Wouldn't send him gross poop stuff usually because I don't know him.
Right.
But we are friends, kind of.
Yeah.
I got a real peek into his life, You know, he would just send a bunch of videos of him and his buddies playing beer pong or something, and just it moved me somehow.
Yeah, well, because it's a really funny video, and then it poses this very interesting question at the end that I think a lot of us are, you know, learning with now, with social media being so new, of just like, what does it mean to have a friend, or you know, and you know, and something like this, we just met for the first time, but I've been following you on Twitter for like 2 years, so it's like I kind of know this guy, like I know he writes jokes and cartoons and is a feminist. Like,
it's weird, isn't it? I mean, that's precisely why you don't do asshole things on the internet,
right?
Because like I've actually took a vow. I mean, not a vow, but I decided maybe 3 or 6 months ago that I just wasn't going to post snarky things about celebrities on Twitter or Facebook or any social media,
Right?
Because first of all, who the fuck cares? And why just be another person commenting on saying mean things? So I don't like post. I only post about my life, my sort of maybe political beliefs, and try to advocate for people who I dig. But I don't do the, you know, it makes me really mad when I see someone who's tweeted something really mean and they've added the @ so that it shows up like, in that celebrity's feed.
At Kanye West.
Yeah, like why? Why would you do that? That's such a dick move. And it like, you know, it might not feel like you're doing anything, but I think the karma that attaches to that is just as real as any other sort of karma you can build up, you know?
Well, the one thing I've noticed is you don't seem to have a problem with going after corporations. Because another one of your videos is the CenturyLink video, which I guess it's still funny, but it's more of a social commentary, or I think it's really informative because you're actually like putting some facts out there as opposed to just being like, "Fuck you, CenturyLink."
I would put that in my sort of advocacy category of videos, which I do. I did one about the dance tax, quote unquote, that when the state of Washington was going to try to levy taxes on any place that had live music, which would have immediately put all the indie venues in town out of business.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I somehow stumbled into a feud with the director of HempFest because I did a video calling out the like outrageous hypocrisy of them opposing the legalization initiative because it was going to cost them market share because they were all invested in the medical marijuana industry.
Yeah.
So I mean, my sort of advocacy videos are basically like when I just come across something in local politics or in my own life that just like infuriates me to a level higher than, you know, so high that I need an outlet for it. That's when I make those. Like the CenturyLink one was when I did a speed test of my internet at home, my Wi-Fi through CenturyLink, and it was 1/10 the speed of the national average. You know, there are people in the middle of Nebraska who get faster internet than I do in Seattle, the internetiest city in the country.
Yeah.
Of course, I live in a traditionally working class, people of color neighborhood who's never gotten the sort of bells and whistles that neighborhoods like Capitol Hill have gotten. So I have this shitty internet speed, and I'm literally exactly 3 miles away from CenturyLink Field, where they spent $75 million to name that stadium for 15 years. So they can outlay that kind of money, but they can't like add some pipes to my neighborhood.
Right.
And it just, I'm actually kind of working on a follow-up to that because there's a lot of ugly local politics that play into how a monopoly like CenturyLink or Comcast comes to be.
Yeah. Well, and we're in Capitol Hill and I have Comcast, and it's not, I don't know what yours is like, but it's certainly not fast over here.
Yeah.
And it goes out all the time. Did they like contact you or anything? Because I think I saw you like retweeted, like, did you say something about CenturyLink and then their like Twitter, whatever?
Their little weird customer service guy.
Yeah.
And then I'm still, this is completely boring to everyone, but I'm still trying to pay my CenturyLink bill because their website's broken. So every time I log in to pay my bill, it shows me the bill from January. like from last January. I can't access my current bill on their website, and I've spent hours on the phone trying to. And they're like, "Oh yeah, the website's down. Sorry." And then I'm like, "Well, can I just pay you?" And they're like, "Well, it's going to cost you $4 extra to pay a live human." So I mean, this infuriates me because when Obamacare was being put to vote, and like a lot of conservatives were saying, like, it's going to be like, the Soviet Union. People are going to be in lines waiting for it. We live in like free market America, and there are much worse monopolies than, the Soviets.
Yeah.
It's just like, but because they're like corporate entities, we're just supposed to be okay with that. It drives me nuts. I don't know how we let two major telecoms take over basically all the communication in Seattle. After I made that video, some guy that was tweeting at me said that the Seattle Police Department could open a citywide Wi-Fi network for the metro area just based on their own Wi-Fi boxes around the city.
Oh yeah.
It's all the infrastructure is already there, and if we had municipal broadband, it would eventually be, a study said it would save something like $20 billion over 2 decades. I forget the exact number. It would be amazing for consumers in the way that City Light is a municipal utility company that we somehow were able to carve out and stop from being bought by some massive conglomerate, and we save an amazing amount of money because we don't have to go through what other cities have gone through.
Right.
So yeah, just another thing that drives me nuts.
Yeah. Well, and so just today you put up something on City Arts, and you linked to a bunch of some other people's videos, and I happened to see one. I can't remember the guy's name, but in the video he called himself Michael J. Fox, but I'm assuming that's not his real name. Oh yeah,
that's D'Artagnan London.
Yeah, and he had about Comcast and the whole net neutrality and how that's totally fucking us over, but really funny video.
Yeah, we made those at like the same week. It was funny how that kind of converged because I was doing a lot of thinking about municipal broadband and our fucked up system on Beacon Hill. And he was that's the local manifestation of this whole broader issue of net neutrality. And I've learned a lot because usually I come at these knowing nothing, but I'm angry about it.
Yeah.
And then I find out what the real story is, and it's even more infuriating than what I thought it would be. That's a perfect example of that.
Yeah. Oh, and a side note, last week I was on the phone with Obamacare, and they were the most pleasant people I've talked to on the phone. The woman stayed on the phone while I scanned, because I'm not an American citizen, while I scanned like my passport, my green card, and all that stuff. And I was just going to send it to her, and she's like, "No, let's stay on the phone just in case it doesn't come through." And
that's great.
She was super nice. So
yeah, my dad just admitted that Obamacare wasn't the second coming of Satan on the phone on Father's Day, which blew my mind. Because I don't talk, he's very conservative. I don't talk about the stuff with him, but he said like, I was opposed to Obamacare, but his wife was able to get a new plan, even though she has a pre-existing condition. And it was like a real tongue biter moment because I wanted to say like, yeah, I told you so. Why did you oppose this so maniacally? But I didn't. I just calmly said like, yeah, that benefited my wife too, who also had a pre-existing condition and was rejected for coverage. So, see?
Right on. So you do a podcast as well, which is a kind of sketches, I guess I would say, which I think is really, really funny. And like, it seems like it's like pretty produced. Is that like...
Totally.
I remember I listened to one where it was like a newscast of a guy who got puppy eyes, which... I really like absurdist humor like that, and I want to clarify. Some people think the word absurd is a negative word. I don't. I think
no.
I thought that was hilarious. So I'd asked you before, are you doing all these voices, or are you inviting a buddy over? And
yeah, so that's Ham Radio Podcast. It's you can find it on my website. I'm not doing it anymore, although I toy around with the idea of making like a super mega episode and just dropping that on there. But yeah, it's an obsessively produced one-man sketch comedy podcast. So 80% of the time, maybe 90% of the time, it's me doing all the voices and then changing the pitches in my software,
right?
And adding in Foley effects and sound effects and background music and stuff. So it is like completely obsessively produced. Like it would take me probably, God, I'm embarrassed to say 20 to 40 hours to make like a 20-minute episode.
Wow, that's a lot of work.
From writing to recording to editing. And I had a blast doing it. I eventually moved into video because the problem with video is you can't do like a guy who had his eyes transplanted with a puppy's eyes because the special effects involved just I don't have the budget for it.
Yeah.
So that's what I loved about the podcast is I could just make up any insane scenario like a crazy robot or whatever, and I could turn it into something.
Yeah,
so.
There was one, I think it might have been that same episode, which reminded me, because there's not, or I guess now because of podcasts, more of these things are available again, but in the 80s, my brother and I, like Dr. Demento and those type of things, which kind of disappeared in the 90s, but I guess maybe podcasts will bring them back, but I was doing folding my laundry, and it was a sketch about this guy. He had two pets that shouldn't be friends, and for some reason they're friends, and then, just mayhem ensues. That I was just, dying laughing listening to this thing, and it's been so long since, like, it's like almost like a radio show, and I guess,
totally.
It'd be great if you could bring it back, but if, it sounds like the production work. But being on Earwolf, that's a pretty big...
yeah, that was that was its total heyday as I was on the Earwolf podcast challenge, the Earwolf challenge. So that kind of helped me get like a national audience for it. And which it was basically a podcast reality show. And the host did not like me. I made it like 3 rounds and I was out. But it got, that meant I got to Skype with like Paul F. Tompkins and Matt Besser and all these huge names. And it just wasn't what they were. My podcast was, if you ever heard of Super Ego.
I've never listened to it, but I'm familiar with it.
Super Ego is like the kings of this right now, of like tightly produced sketch podcasts with sound effects and all that stuff. And also the Pod F Tomcast had...
I listen to that every once in a while.
That was also an inspiration. Or as I was starting doing it, I became aware of that. So yeah, I just like again, it just comes back to like, I like making things. Like, here's a whole show, so now you have to make like the theme song and the opening thing, and then like maybe a commercial, and I just like having the creative control to like make a whole thing and make all the million different creative choices that go into that. That's like that's what gets me off, man. That's like when I'm working on a video or something is the happiest I ever am, because I have a purpose, and the rest of the time it's just shit. So
well, yeah, and then we're getting close to out of time, but
oh wow.
One of your articles, and this is one of the things I came across a while ago before I think I had put 2 and 2 together, that you were the guy I was following on Twitter, but just to go back to comedy clubs and stuff, is you had this great article about comedians don't like hecklers, obviously, but how, and I think I share this like morbid wanting to watch with you, there's so many great videos now on YouTube of a heckler saying something and then the comedian destroying them.
Yes.
And I find that really satisfying to watch, because hecklers in any form, anytime you're on a stage and somebody's like fucking with you, interrupting it, they deserve to be taken down.
They're the worst. Don't ever heckle. And if you know anyone who's a heckler, stop being friends with them right now. They're terrible people.
Have you ever been in that situation? And are you the type of person who would just ignore it, or would you try to shut them up or take them down a peg?
Earlier in my comedy career, I just wanted to avoid it and do as little as possible. But now I feel like I'm confident enough in being able to deliver my material that I will allow myself to get sidetracked and sort of go after. So yeah, I've definitely had to go after hecklers. I've said things that I'm not proud of that got laughs and turned the audience against this person. But it's like, it happens, It's not as like, people build it up to be like, oh my God, hecklers, you know. Usually you can just say, hey, shut up. I mean, the trick is to do it in a way that the rest of the audience is on your side.
Yeah.
But you have to call. I mean, if you don't call them out or acknowledge it, then you're not being honest with the audience either. So
right.
I try to call it out. Even if someone has like a really weird laugh or something, I try to make my shows at least, I don't know, 10 to 20% just for that night and what's happening in that room. You know, if I'm in some weird road gig in a weird bar where there's like a train set running around the top of the room, or just I like to like make that a unique experience for everyone who's watching the show. I don't always do it, but I try.
And would that be something while you're waiting to go on stage you would think about, or would it be the type of thing that would come into your head like while you're up there?
Oh, absolutely. Like I will definitely think a few beats worth of stuff about the room. I won't start with it. I'll tell a couple jokes, and then if I kind of am feeling loose and they're with me, then I'll start, you know, making fun of their town or whatever.
Right.
Like I just did a show in Hoquiam at this little bar. It's a very kind of sad downtown area.
Hoquiam?
It's just past Aberdeen.
Oh, okay.
Which is, you might also not know where that is, but
right.
And on the way to the show, I stopped in this other bar, and there was like two guys there. So then I went to the bar where the show was, and I just started shitting on the other bar and saying they suck, let's go kick their asses. And everyone was like, yeah! Like, just whipping them into a frenzy. Like, they knew exactly the bar I was talking about and exactly the old guy who was sitting at the bar. So, you know, to me, that's a little extra effort I can make to make it special just for them, you know, since they're paying me for a day's worth of work for 45 minutes. You know, that's the least I can do.
So are you at the point now where your sets are up to 45 minutes to an hour, or like 45 minutes?
Yeah, I'm mostly headlining on the road, like in sort of roadhouses and places like Kennewick and Toledo and Hoquiam. And in the clubs, I'm mostly featuring. In clubs and casinos, I mostly feature. Though this year has been kind of a year where I'm moving up and being allowed to do those longer sets.
Yeah. How about, do you go outside of the Northwest much?
No. I mean, I go down to LA periodically. I go to New York periodically. I go up to Canada. I just did my first run in Canada, in Kamloops and Kelowna, British Columbia, if you've ever heard of those.
I have not. I was born in British Columbia, but I don't know where
you don't know where that is? See, that's where I'm at in my career. If you're really wondering, like if I'm headlining a room, you know, I'll ask the people, hey, what's the shitty town here everyone makes fun of?
Right.
And they'll say, this is the town everyone makes fun of. That's my wheelhouse right now.
Right. And then, so do you have a joke where that shitty town's the punchline, or?
Depends. Like, usually it's funny because usually you think, well, I shouldn't come in here and shit on their town.
Right.
No, just the opposite. They want you to rail their town up and down because that gives them pleasure. Because they know it's a shitty town. Come on,
right.
Like, you're from Seattle. They're embarrassed for you to even be seeing their town. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah, they love it for the most part.
Cool. Well, that's probably a good place to end on. Let me just make sure I haven't missed anything. Yeah, it looks like we covered everything. Do you want to just talk about any dates that you got coming up? Or
yeah.
And they're all on BrettHamil.com, and follow him on Twitter at Brett Hamil, and I'll make sure that those links are in the comments.
Yes. I'm by the way, I'm very proud to be now podcast Eskimo Brothers with local notables like Sir Mix-a-Lot.
Nice.
Whenever I'm on a podcast, I like to see who I'm Eskimo Brothers with now.
Yeah.
So quite an impressive roster on this show. Let's see. Oh, next weekend, I will be at Laughs Comedy Spot in Kirkland, opening for Dave Coulier of Full House fame.
I think he's a Canadian.
He is a Canadian. He's actually very funny. A lot of like these old TV guys are not funny at all, but he's actually super funny. I worked with him before. He's great. Then July 2nd, I will be at the Underground. It's my Wednesday night showcase, Bunt Cake, with Emmett Montgomery, another former guest, will be there.
Nice, funny guy.
So, you know, he's definitely the type of guy I like to have on my shows. Someone like that. Yeah, and then on to the rest of the summer. But yeah, go to my website. I'll post some dates.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for doing this. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Steve.